Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into something pretty significant for New Zealand's building scene, the Building Amendment Bill 2025. Specifically, how it impacts building materials coming in from overseas.
Yeah, it's a big one. If you're anywhere in the construction chain, uh, design, building, manufacturing, or honestly, even if you're just curious about how things get built around here, this new law well, it's worth paying attention to.
Definitely. It really looks set to change what materials we can actually use and how they get approved.
Exactly. So the plan today is basically to unpack the main changes. What are the upsides? What are the potential roadblocks?
And what does it all signal for the future of building in Aotearoa? That's the mission.
And we're basing this on analysis of the bill itself, obviously, but also pulling in insights from across the industry. What are people actually saying about it?
Okay, let's dive in. The core idea, it seems, is making it easier for overseas building products to get used here. What's really driving that?
Well, the main aim, fundamentally, is about streamlining things. You know, cutting some of that red tape around using international materials.
Right. The old way involved a lot of retesting here, even for good products.
That's it. Even if a product met high standards elsewhere, it often faced, well, pretty exhaustive retesting in New Zealand. Added time, added cost. So the push is for efficiency and access to more options.
Makes sense. So, this new system, what does it actually look like? How does it work?
Okay, so the bill sets up a clearer pathway. The Ministry of Business, Innovation, and Employment, MBIE, gets the power to officially recognize trusted international standards and certification schemes.
Ah, okay. So if a product's already certified under one of these recognized schemes.
Then the idea is it should have a much, much smoother path to being accepted for use here in New Zealand. MBIE really becomes the central gatekeeper, you could say.
Right. So MBIE's role is pretty crucial then. What exactly will they be doing?
Their job is to assess these international standards and the bodies that certify them. They'll issue what are called recognition notices for the ones they deem reliable.
And they keep a list?
Yeah, importantly, they'll maintain a public record. It's called the Building Product Specifications document that lists all the overseas standards and certifications that have been given the green light.
Okay, and once a product or standard is on that MBI list, what happens then for, say, a local council?
This is where it gets really interesting for builders and designers. Building consent authorities, your BCAs, the local councils, they must accept building products that comply with an MBIE-recognized overseas standard.
Must accept. That's strong wording.
It is, and there's more.
Yeah.
The bill actually shields these BCAs from liability if a product fails, provided it was used correctly, as intended under that recognized standard.
Wow. Okay, that's a pretty significant shift in where the responsibility lies, isn't it?
Huge. It moves the focus potentially away from the council in certain failure scenarios.
So when can we expect these changes to really start happening? What's the time frame?
The target they've set is July 2025. That's for wider acceptance of what they're calling over 12,000 essential building products.
12,000 by July? Like what kind of products?
They've specifically mentioned things like plasterboard, cladding, insulation, the common stuff. Stuff that should, in theory, see easier entry.
That sounds incredibly fast. 12,000 products. What's the longer term vision here?
Well, the government's projections suggest that by the end of 2025, we could be looking at tens of thousands of products becoming available through this pathway.
Tens of thousands.
Yeah, with an initial focus probably on materials coming out of Australia. The ambition is definitely there to significantly ramp up the variety and volume of products pretty quickly.
And the benefits they're hoping for are more choice, lower prices.
Pretty much. Increased supply choices for builders, architects, access to maybe more innovative materials coming from overseas. And yeah, the big hope is fair prices. For construction firms, and hopefully eventually for people buying or renovating homes.
The competition argument.
Exactly. More competition should, in theory, help keep costs in check.
Okay, that makes sense on paper. But New Zealand's building code is a bit different, isn't it? Performance-based rather than prescriptive like some other countries. How does that fit?
That's a really, really important point. Our code specifies the performance a building needs to achieve, how safe, how durable it has to be, rather than dictating exactly which materials or methods you must use.
Whereas other countries might say you must use this specific type of insulation.
Kind of, yeah. They can be much more prescriptive.
Yeah.
So it's like our code says the house needs to be this warm, not you must use brand X insulation installed in precisely this way.
So comparing standards isn't straightforward then. It's not apples and apples.
Not always, no. And the bill acknowledges this. It says only overseas standards that are judged to be equivalent to or higher than New Zealand's requirements will get MBIE recognition.
And who judges that equivalence? That sounds tricky.
It is tricky. MBIE has to determine it. Take, say, a fire-rated wall panel certified overseas. It might need extra checks to ensure it performs as needed within a typical New Zealand timber-framed house design, not just in the specific system it was tested in overseas.
So ensuring that international standard actually delivers the safety we expect here.
That's the core challenge, yes.
So how is MBI going to manage that, making sure these foreign standards really do stack up?
They're developing specific tools for this. They're called Building Product Equivalency Specifications.
Okay.
These are basically designed to fast-track the comparison process. Think of them as mapping documents, lining up foreign standards against our building code requirements.
And they're focusing on certain product types first.
Yes, initially they're looking at key areas like internal linings, external claddings, windows, plumbing fittings, and insulation. High-impact areas.
So an Australian window standard, for example, would need checking against our specific wind loads, our earthquake requirements, that sort of thing.
Exactly that. Rigorous comparison is needed.
Seems sensible to start there.
Hmm.
But what about installation? What if a product is certified okay under an overseas standard, but then it's put in wrong here?
That's critical. The bill is very clear. The product has to be used as intended under that recognized certification. Meaning if you misuse it, if you install it incorrectly, or use it in a way the certification didn't cover, then that streamlined compliance pathway, it could just go out the window. Proper installation is still absolutely key.
And then there's New Zealand's own environment, seismic activity, UV rays, moisture. It's pretty unique.
Absolutely. That's a major consideration. Our high earthquake risk, our really intense UV, the way moisture behaves in our climate, even a top-tier product certified elsewhere might not last or perform as expected here long-term.
So caution is still needed.
Definitely. Industry experts are rightly flagging this. You still need due diligence to make sure an imported product can actually handle New Zealand's specific conditions year after year.
Right. So even with MBIE recognition, there's still a need for careful thought and understanding of how these products behave here. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The NZ building market, it has some very established products, doesn't it? GIB plasterboard is the classic example. How does this bill potentially affect that dominance?
Yeah, that's a huge question. Because you're right, products like GEP aren't just market leaders in sales, our actual building methods have often evolved around them.
Oh, so?
Well, think about things like bracing systems in houses or specific fire-rated wall assemblies. The specifications for those often directly reference or are based on testing with GIB-led products.
Ah, I see. So it's deeply embedded in the system.
Very deeply. It's not just about builders being familiar with the brand, though that's part of it. The regulatory side, the design guides, the standard details, they often reinforce the use of these incumbent products.
So bringing in an alternative plasterboard, even a good one with international certification, it's not straightforward.
It can be really complex. Builders, designers, councils, they know GI. They have decades of experience with it. They might be quite hesitant to switch to something unfamiliar without a lot of supporting data and, crucially, evidence it works reliably in our specific building types.
So the law might change, but habits and trust take longer.
Exactly. Legal change doesn't automatically mean market disruption. For this bill to really shift things on site, you need that industry buy-in.
Yeah.
You need acceptance. You need training.
Is MBIE aware of that?
Yes, they've acknowledged they'll need to provide guidance on using unfamiliar building products, but getting everyone comfortable specifying and installing new materials, that's going to take real effort and time.
And what about the overseas suppliers themselves? What role do they need to play?
A massive one. They can't just ship products and hope for the best. They need to invest heavily in education and technical support that's specific to New Zealand.
Like NZ-specific manuals?
Yes. NZ installation guides, local technical helplines, readily available stock in New Zealand, not just on order from overseas.
Right.
And we can't forget the lessons from the leaky building crisis, can we? That showed how even innovative products can cause massive problems if they're misunderstood or misused in our local context.
A very sobering reminder. So suppliers need to be proactive with support.
Absolutely essential for successful adoption, I'd say.
And beyond the technical side, there's the commercial reality, too. The Commerce Commission pointed out existing relationships in the supply chain, didn't they? Rebates, loyalties.
Yes, exactly. Established suppliers often have long-standing deals, Rebate structures, loyalty programs with merchants and distributors, that can make it harder for a new product, even a good one, to get visibility or shelf space.
So those commercial barriers might slow things down too.
They could well mean that the practical uptake of new overseas products lags behind the legal changes. These relationships don't just vanish overnight.
Okay, let's turn to liability. This is always a huge topic in New Zealand construction. Who carries the can if something goes wrong with one of these newly approved overseas products? How does the bill change that picture?
Right, this is a really significant part of the bill. New Zealand operates under joint and several liability. Historically, that's often meant BCAs, the councils, have been prime targets in defect claims,
Why them specifically?
often because they're seen as having the deep pockets or the most reliable insurance compared to, say, a small building firm that might no longer exist. A key aim of this bill seems to be easing that pressure on councils.
Okay, shifting the risk somehow.
That seems to be the intention. The risk appears to shift more towards the overseas manufacturers, the importers, and potentially the builders installing the products.
How does the bill actually do that? What's the mechanism?
It explicitly shields BCAs from liability for failures of MBIE-recognized products if, and this is the important bit, if the product was used correctly, as intended, under that recognized standard.
So if a council approves an MBIE-endorsed cladding, it's installed properly, but then it fails later, the council shouldn't be liable.
That's the principle, yes. The liability would likely fall elsewhere in the chain.
Primarily onto the supplier or manufacturer?
That seems most likely, yes. And New Zealand courts have shown they're willing to hold manufacturers accountable. We have seen significant cases.
Like the Carter Holt Harvey case involving leaky schools?
Exactly. And the various James Hardie class actions. These cases have established that manufacturers can indeed owe a duty of care to the eventual building owners. They need to ensure their products are fit for purpose.
The James Hardie cases seem particularly relevant here, setting precedents.
They really are. Even though James Hardie wasn't ultimately found negligent in the main homeowner action, the legal principle was firmly set. Manufacturers of key components owe a duty of care.
And the importance of instruction.
Yes, the court stressed how crucial clear, accurate installation instructions are. And also a duty to warn if a manufacturer later discovers potential issues with their product.
And the financial stakes are high. Those settlements in the White and Metliff cases against James Hardie were substantial.
Absolutely. They show the kind of financial risk manufacturers face if things go wrong on a large scale. Overseas suppliers entering NZ need to be very aware they could face similar legal actions here.
So they need to be prepared to stand by their products in our courts.
Precisely. They need to understand the New Zealand legal environment.
And unlike some other countries, we don't have universal mandatory builder's warranty schemes or anything like that, do we?
No, we don't have a comprehensive safety net like that. If an overseas product causes defects, there isn't some automatic insurance pool to pay out. The liability sits with the parties involved.
So what does that mean for insurance?
It means overseas manufacturers really need robust product liability insurance that specifically covers New Zealand. And builders, well, they might increasingly look for indemnities from their suppliers to manage their own risk exposure.
Okay, so the insurance side of things could get quite a bit more complex for everyone involved. Now, thinking about the actual building process, how will these new products be checked and signed off on site? There are also other changes happening, like remote inspections and talk of self-certification. How do they fit in?
Yeah, those are important parallel streams happening. Remote inspections using video or photos for council checks got a boost during the pandemic, and they're likely here to stay for certain things.
And self-certification.
That's a proposal where accredited, experienced builders could potentially sign off on certain types of lower-risk work themselves, reducing the need for council inspections for those tasks.
Okay, so how might more remote checks or builder sign-offs affect using these new overseas products?
Well, remote inspections could be efficient, but spotting subtle installation errors with an unfamiliar product via video link, that might be harder than seeing it in person.
True, you might miss something.
And self-certification puts more onus directly on the builder. That could speed up adoption of new materials if the builder's confident. But it also means the products really need to be straightforward to get right.
And have excellent instructions.
Absolutely crucial. Clear guides, maybe even video tutorials, good technical backup. Suppliers will need to provide top-notch support if builders are taking on more sign-off responsibility.
It sounds like training and documentation become even more critical.
They really do. And you might find that even with MBIE recognition, BCAs initially apply more scrutiny to designs using novel overseas products, especially in complex situations. I want to be sure.
Although the government is pushing for faster consenting timelines, isn't it?
Yes, there's that push for mandatory performance timelines for BCAs, which might counteract any tendency towards excessive caution or delays on new products. It's a bit of a balancing act.
Okay, let's talk about the bottom line, cost. A huge motivation for this bill is making building more affordable. Materials are what, maybe 25% of a new build cost?
Roughly, yes, it's a significant chunk.
So the hope is cheaper overseas materials mean cheaper houses. But will those savings actually reach the consumer?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or perhaps the several $100,000 question for a new house.
Indeed.
While the intention is definitely to use competition to lower material costs, there's a genuine concern, backed by some market analysis, that those savings might not automatically flow through to the final price tag.
Why not? Industry dynamics?
Partly, yes. Historically, price competition on materials at the builder level hasn't always been super intense in New Zealand.
So builders might just pocket the difference, or merchants.
That's the risk. Market studies have suggested builders don't always shop around aggressively for the absolute cheapest option, and often work on a cost-plus basis. They pass on the material cost, plus their margin.
And margins have been growing.
There's been evidence suggesting profit margins in parts of the building sector have increased in recent years. So, yes, if material costs drop, there's no guarantee the final house price falls proportionally. The savings could get absorbed along the way.
So what could help ensure savings do get passed on?
Well, greater transparency in pricing would help. If homeowners can see the cost benefits of using certain products, they might be able to negotiate better.
More competition among builders themselves.
That too. More players, more competition could put downward pressure on overall prices. And maybe some government monitoring or public pressure to highlight whether savings are actually materializing.
But it's important to remember materials are only one part of the affordability puzzle.
Absolutely critical point. Land costs are huge. Regulatory costs and delays add up. Labor costs are significant. So cheaper materials, great, could definitely help. But it's not a silver bullet for housing affordability on its own.
Okay, so putting it all together. If you're an overseas manufacturer looking at New Zealand now, thinking this is my chance, what are the key things you absolutely need to do?
Right, strategically. First off, don't just sit back. You need to proactively engage with MBIE. Understand their recognition pathway, provide the data they need, argue your case for your standards to be recognized.
Be proactive, not reactive.
Exactly. Second, localize everything. Technical documents, installation guides, warranties, make them NZ specific. Make sure your product info meets our local building product information requirements. Don't just dump your international specs.
Have a local presence.
Hugely important. Whether it's a subsidiary, a trusted distributor, a joint venture, having people on the ground who understand the NZ context, who can offer support, build relationships, that's crucial for trust.
Makes sense. What else?
Quality control and risk management have to be top-notch. Given the liability situation, you cannot afford product failures. Think about robust QA, maybe even look at offering insured warranties if possible.
And connect with the industry.
Yes, integrate. Talk to the professional bodies, architects, engineers, builders. Provide samples. Be prepared to answer tough questions about insurance, about liability, about performance in NZ conditions.
And legally.
Think carefully about your contracts. Choice of law, dispute resolution like arbitration, maybe look at indemnities. Get good local legal advice on how to protect yourself within the New Zealand system.
So the core message is, don't underestimate New Zealand. It's a sophisticated market, high standards, unique conditions. Invest properly, focus on quality, build relationships for the long term.
That sums it up perfectly. It's not just about getting initial approval, it's about building sustained trust and demonstrating commitment.
Okay, so wrapping this up. The Building Amendment Bill 2025, it really is poised to shake things up regarding overseas building products in New Zealand.
Yeah, there's clear potential there for easier market access, maybe more innovation filtering through, and hopefully some downward pressure on construction costs.
But as we've discussed, it's definitely not without its hurdles. Getting those international standards properly integrated with our unique code.
Overcoming those really ingrained market habits and preferences.
And navigating that complex web of liability and insurance.
It's going to require a really careful collaborative effort from everyone, suppliers, builders, designers, regulators.
It really sounds like a case for cautious optimism, perhaps. A need for the thorough due diligence mixed with an openness to the potential benefits.
I think that's a good way to put it. Due diligence is going to be absolutely paramount for everybody involved.
And for you, our listener, as these changes start rolling out from potentially mid-2025 onwards, maybe think about how this influx of international materials might change what you see being built. How might it influence design, construction methods, the very feel and performance of our buildings? It certainly raises some interesting questions about the future of building in New Zealand, something to keep an eye on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.